Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. Today I'm going to be expanding the video I did last week, where I unboxed all the 1/72nd scale F-35 toolings available, with the first of the detailed unboxing and build videos I promised. If you've not yet seen the original video, I'll also link it above for you here. Now I'm going to start off with the new Airfix F-35B, since that's both the newest tool available and also the simplest one to build, as it's a starter set. As I mentioned on a prior video, this is in Airfix's usual starter set format, which means the painting and decal guide is on the rear, and the set is in an end opening box. Once that's opened up, everything slides out and we can look at what we have. The instruction booklet is first folded in half to fit inside. Next is another full colour sheet of things to acquaint yourself with before building the kit, a really nice addition to a starter set. We then have the tiny decal sheet and its protective cover. The sprues are all contained together in a single bag, though it should be noted the transparency is separately bagged within this. We then have a small bag with the 6 paints and glue. And finally a couple of Humbrol brushes. Inside the bag, the main aircraft upper fuselage is a single moulding, including delicately recessed panel lines and an integrally moulded cockpit and instrument panel. The main lower fuselage is very similar to the upper in its execution. Other main parts are also cleanly moulded, such as the lower nose, and the EOTS fairing is integral to this piece as well. It has to be said that Airfix's casting here is fantastic, though the tabs inside the engine nozzle could give beginners a hard time. The only obviously disappointing area here is the pilot, who seems both undersized and rather wooden in his sitting on the toilet pose. The undercarriage, on the other hand, looks really good. The last item is Airfix's rather clever shadow stand, a particularly welcome inclusion in a starter set. This is the first time I've seen one of Airfix's before you start sheets, and I have to say it's pretty good. Being on a separate sheet, it's easy to keep by the side of the instructions to keep referring back to, and it uses colour well to clearly depict what it's trying to say. Airfix have also set a new bar with the instructions here. They start with a clear overview of all the parts and their sprue trees covering a whole side of A4. Getting into the instructions themselves, they are large, extremely clear, with colour used cleverly to highlight areas to cement, for example. Each step also shows the location of the parts on the relevant sprues to help you locate them, which saves having to refer back to the front sheet or waste time poring over each sprue to find something. Overall, these are well thought out, practical improvements to the way the instructions convey information, rather than just being flashy gimmicks, and I hope this continues in other kits. The instructions also show fitment of Airfix's push-fit canopy, more on that later. The decal sheet is small, covering the instrument panel, basic markings and warnings, very much in keeping with Airfix's other starter sets. The canopy is single piece, very clear, but does include an external moulding of the internal canopy frame. Looking in detail at the main fuselage, you can see there is basic cockpit detail moulded in, and similar for the main lift fan on top of the aircraft. Moving down the airframe, there is no detail for the supplemental intake, but the panel lining here is good, with no exaggerated ram tape as found on some other manufacturers' mouldings. The rear of the aircraft has the fine sawtooth serrations seen here above the engine nozzle, very well represented. The underside has some simplifications, like the lift exhaust duct, the obvious flight stand hole, the inaccurate VTOL engine bay hinges, and an absence of roll posts on the wings. Taking a closer look at the smaller pieces, you can see how well these are cast. There are no injection pin marks on any of the visible surfaces, including landing gear doors, which is a frequent issue on many kits. As seen on the exhaust, there are a host of small excess injection wells to snip off, but that is a small price to pay for a flawless casting. A close-up of the lower nose shows the integrally moulded ETOS and the detail in the forward landing gear bay. Vertical stabilisers are single pieces, again with fine engraved detail on both sides. As per the instructions, I started by attaching the lower nose to the lower hull, which fitted flawlessly. Next are the 3 fuselage formers, the first having the rear engine fan moulded on. My main criticism here is that the forward piece simply blanks off the air intakes with a flat wall, which I think is a little crude, even though not too much will be visible in the finished model. The next step is to glue the fuselage halves together, as there is no cockpit to add, and I think for an absolute beginner this gives a sense of early achievement, which is a good thing. I used contact cement, clamped the wings and nose, and added Tamiya thin to the joins. I decided to have the aircraft on its stand for a conventional takeoff or landing, so made the nozzle with the straight option and glued it into place over the turbofan outlet. The exhaust is by far the weakest part on this kit, as it doesn't really capture the conical look of the real thing. Making a conventionally landing model meant I could use the stand and also the landing gear, which is pretty good, and ignore the kit's weakest areas, which are around the STOL system. That meant I could use all the closed bay options, which fit perfectly without any noticeable gaps at all. At this point, I'd barely spent 30 minutes building the kit and I was already on to painting. I sprayed the wheel wells white and the cockpit grey, and then picked out the instrument panel and cowling in black for the later decal application. I then masked the wheel wells with damp tissue, which I then covered with artist masking fluid. I then added the push-fit canopy, completely masked this with Tamiya tape, and covered the tape with masking fluid to ensure there were no gaps. Once all of this was dry, I sprayed the entire model with Autotech Grey Primer, which is a suitably bland grey. Because this is so uniform and bland, I decided to recreate some of the ram tape by masking and spraying with a lighter grey. This was by far the longest part of the whole process, but it was completely self-imposed, and once I'd started it, I had to see it through. With all of the delicate bits done, I then filled in all of the bulk of the masking with more tape and masking fluid, and then gave the overspray of lighter grey. With the aircraft looking a bit more interesting now, it was time to use the engraved panel lines to add a bit more interest, so I picked these out using Tamiya panel line accent. When dry, excess was removed with makeup removers and white spirit. Next up were the decals. These are extremely thin, but colour dense, and I had no issues with any of them, though I do feel that they might be too delicate for an absolute beginner. The last piece here was to unmask the canopy, before moving on to final assembly. I had sprayed the remaining pieces at the same time as the respective areas on the main aircraft, and detail painted them, so it was just a matter of cementing all these pieces in place. The undercarriage and their doors all have very positive locating lugs, and everything went on without a hitch. So let's have a look at the finished aircraft. Airfix's F-35B is an interesting kit, and one you can judge one of two ways. Purely as a starter set aimed at the beginner or novice, this is an excellent kit, probably on par with the Firefly starter set in terms of ease of build. The instructions are industry leading in terms of their clarity and usefulness from a modeller's perspective, with intelligent use of colour and helpful pieces like the location of the part on the sprues. I really hope this style becomes the norm. The push-fit canopy is superb for a novice, or even intermediate modeller, though it does mean you can only have the cockpit closed, and the overall casting quality and engineering is superb. The decals might be a bit of a challenge for a novice, but that's about the only detraction from a starter kit point of view. Judged as a normal kit, however, the kit does have some problems. There are simplifications in visible areas that detract from the model's overall look. The worst offender being the exhaust, which really doesn't look like that on the F-35 at all. The parts for a hovering aircraft leave a lot to be desired too, with many absent areas such as roll posts and positionable stabilisers. On the flip side of that, the undercarriage is really quite nice, and the overall engraving is delicate and precise, which means that it's left in a strange middle ground. Airfix's other starter kits have models that build up really well for any modeller, whereas this will need a lot of work to be comparable to the competition, which is a shame because there's 2/3 or more of what's needed to make a truly great F-35 here. Despite all of that, this is a great kit that shows just how far Airfix has come in a pretty short amount of time, and I really hope they continue their current trajectory because that is only good for all of us. As it is, this is still a solid silver recommendation, which goes up to a must-buy if you're getting it as a first kit for someone, as it is probably the perfect entry point for a prospective aviation modeller. In fact, I think it's easy enough that I'm prepared to say that I could combine a normal starter set challenge with my 1-hour challenge and say you could build a finished model from this set using only what's provided in the kit in under an hour. If that's something you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. With that, it just remains for me to thank all of my wonderful patrons and channel members for their support, and I'll see you next time. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.